Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Karen Yarhimilo. I am the Dean of SIPA and the Adlai E. Stevenson Professor of International Affairs. This special and timely conversation is sponsored by the Institute of Global Politics, IGP, and the Saltzman Institute of War and Peace Studies. It is my great, sorry. You could all hear me, right? Okay. It is my great honor to welcome Abdallah Bou Habib, Lebanon's 50th Minister of Foreign Affairs and Emigrants. We are deeply, deeply grateful he has taken the time to visit with us today, particularly given recent escalation of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah and the profound crisis Lebanon is now facing. These events also come against the backdrop of the world's largest diplomatic event, the 79th UN General Assembly. As you know, diplomats from around the world are here in New York working to prevent a larger regional war. Dr. Bou Habib is an economist by training and has worked at the World Bank in a variety of roles. He also served as Lebanon's ambassador to the United States from 1983 to 1990 and as a senior advisor to Lebanon's deputy prime minister from 2001 to 2005. He was sworn in to his current post in September 2021. Dr. Bou Habib will be in conversation with our own Paige Fortna. Professor Fortna is the director of the SIPA's Saltzman Institute of War and Peace and the Harold Brown Professor of U.S. Foreign and Security Policy at Columbia's Department of Political Science. As you know, she is one of the world's foremost experts on terrorism, the durability of peace after civil and interstate wars, and war termination. I know that the foreign minister is very short on time, so we only have about 45 minutes to an hour to spend with him. Let's make it count. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Abdallah Bou Habib and Professor Paige Fortna.
Thank you so much, Karen. We good on mics? Okay.
I don't know if you can hear you. No, turn it on.
You have to turn it on.
Better? Yep. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us, Foreign Minister. We know you are incredibly busy, always, but especially right now. And so we'll jump right in. I'll ask you a few questions and we'll have a bit of back and forth, and then I'll open it up to Q&A. I know you have to leave at 2:45, so we'll ask everyone, while you're thinking of your questions, to please keep them brief. And I will also try to be brief. For almost a year now, there has been a great fear of escalation of the conflict in the Middle East to engulfing Lebanon and then perhaps a wider regional war. And just in the last week, of course, things have escalated quite dramatically. I'm not going to hash back over kind of how we got here, but I want to ask you to think about how we move forward. So in the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, the government of Lebanon is not a direct party to that conflict, but of course the government of Lebanon and of course the people of Lebanon are very directly affected. Your government is of course constrained in what it can do, but I wanted to ask you what in your view, if anything, the government of Lebanon is able to do to reduce escalation, and then also to turn to what in your view would be the most constructive approach that the United States could take in helping to de-escalate the current crisis and or keep it from escalating to an even more dangerous stage.
Thank you very much. It's very difficult to talk about the present if you don't go a little bit back to the past. Hezbollah, is a political party in Lebanon, but also has what they call resistance section. Or why do you have resistance? Because we have occupied areas. Israel occupies some areas from Lebanon. And there was a UN Security Council resolution in 2006 that says it's 1701, and according to that resolution. We should have solved our problems, but we didn't solve any of them. Lebanon wants peace. We don't want war. We had a civil war a long time. It took 15 years to get over it. And the people of Lebanon are, if you go to Beirut, you'll see happiness and you see a kind of joyful glory that you will see all the time around the Mediterranean. But Beirut is a special city. If some of you would have visited it, you will see that. You can testify to that. So we don't want war. And recently a poll shows that 90% of the Lebanese don't want war. 90%, which means that all Lebanon is a pluralist society, and it seems that all sections, all of the Lebanese, all communities in Lebanon, most of them do not want the war. Why the war is there? Because we had a resistance. Why do we have a resistance? Because Israel occupies some of our land. And until we cannot get out of this is a kind of international, not law, but understanding that there is occupation, there is a resistance. So we tried many times in the past to really solve this problem of the border and have a border like Israel has with Jordan and with Egypt, which is a secure border. And we really were not successful in that. And the United Nations testifies to that because they were involved in it. We have a United Nations interim force in Lebanon, which is on the borders, in the Lebanese land, but on the borders with Israel. And they were like the intermediary in order to go in between and try to have meetings. We have tripartite meetings monthly or every couple of months, and they talk about the issues on the border. And I think it was unsuccessful, and we were unsuccessful because we want to stabilize these borders. We do not want troubles, and we know that we cannot stop the resistance as long as there is land which is occupied. So you have a resistance movement in South Lebanon. Okay. When the war in Gaza started, and resistance movements feel that they all are a kind of same family, support each other, whatever. Did they ask the government? No. And the following day, after October 7, they started, but there were rules of engagement. 2-3 kilometers, both borders. But every time there is an escalation, it was Israel who made the escalation. And really, I'm not defending Hezbollah. I like to see my country with one armed forces, and the sovereignty and the presence and security presence would be the government's, not anybody else. That's what I myself like, and that's what we are working for, but we have a fact on the ground. We are not going to there is occupation, there is a resistance, and we don't want to go to civil war again. So they joined. But every time there is an escalation, it was Israeli. I give you the recent one, like it happened a couple months ago in the Golans, when 12 Syrians, they were not Israelis, they were Syrians. Yes, Golan Heights is a Syrian land occupied by Israel since 1967. And the issue is that 12 kids were killed, they were playing football. Okay. There are 3 UN organizations that work around that area. UNIFIL in Lebanon, ANSO on the borders between Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Israel. And what's the name of the last one? UNDOF, between on Syria and the Golan, yes. Well, they are not there, chapter 7, this means that they are not a fighting force, they are more observation force. And we still did not get, because we did not get a report on what happened that day. We think we hear it informally from these organizations that what happened, yes, there was a missile going from Lebanon. It was intercepted, and the shrapnels fell over the field, and 12 kids were killed. Now, the issue is that whose fault it is? Probably it's nobody's fault. I mean, the fault is that there is a war, okay? But it's nobody's fault that they fell there. The body of the missile was not there. The missile, if it fell there, it would create a big hole. There isn't anything. There's shrapnels in the football field. And Israel took it an excuse in order to hit the southern suburbs of Beirut and kill, at that time, something like 6 or 7 people were killed and something like 20 injured because it hit one building, And the next day it hit some Palestinian leader in Tehran, and the third day it hit somebody in Iraq. So why is that? Nobody understands. Everybody, including the United States government, they made a very strong campaign in order to not to retaliate the same amount, not to do it. And we as a government, we talk to Hezbollah, and we talk to the Iranians as well, say first, we don't, and 2 days before that, there was an attack on Yemen by Israel. So we wanted not to have a joint attack. If they have a joint attack from Lebanon, Iran, Yemen, and Iraq, this means a war. This means drawing the United States to the war. And the United States worked hard not to do it. And this wasn't done. Each one took it on his own to do something. But there was no something, there was nothing that would cause a war to happen, in fact. So, but the escalation started then and before, even before then, but it wasn't big escalation. But then it seems that there was nothing to do in Gaza anymore. And, Hamas is still there, but underground. No more buildings to destroy or whatever it is. 41 or 42,000 Palestinians were killed, and there are lots still under the rubble. 15,000, they estimate the orphans. I don't understand that because, this creates more bitterness than existed before. This creates, even if now the Palestinians are completely paralyzed, in 10 years they're going to be better and they're going to do similar things to what happened on October 7, unless a solution is found. And same thing on the borders with Lebanon. Unless a solution is found, and we agreed on the borders. And the borders is, between Lebanon, it was first between Lebanon and Palestine, was drawn in 1923. The British were in Palestine and the French were in Lebanon. It was between the Lebanese and between the French and the British. In 1949, when Israel was established in 1948, there were some negotiations, indirect negotiations, and it happened in Rhodes in Greece, and under the auspices of the United Nations. And we agreed that this border is the border between us. The border of 1923 was confirmed in 1949. But in 1978, Israel occupied South Lebanon. And so when they withdrew from, not from to the borders, to the truce line, as we call it, what they call the blue line. And the blue line, we don't consider it to be our borders. There are like 13 disputed points. Say, let's talk about it. We started talking about it a few years ago, and we succeeded in reaching an agreement on 7 points. And there were swapping of land. Why? Because in 22 years Israeli occupation, they created settlements close to the border. And therefore, if there is a Lebanese hill, they would not give it back. So we accepted. They took the hill, they gave us land. There was swapping acceptable. And suddenly, everything stopped, and we will not finish drawing the border or going back to the border with some kind of amendment. Now, recently, there was just a decision that they want to escalate in Lebanon. Gaza was hit less, and now in Lebanon. The first thing that happened, which was technologically very imaginative and very advanced, is that they pagers. I mean, Hezbollah people, it seems they carried pagers. You're talking about 4,000 of them, and 4,000 exploded at the same time. Hands were finished, eyes, sometimes both eyes, and sometimes if the pager was in your pocket, everything was here in the abdomen or whatever around it or something was damaged. Our hospitals could not take more, and doctors were working 24 hours really in order to try to save some. And then later another kind of explosion took place. These are dangerous things for humanity. These are, new methods that terrorists can learn and do it in the future. But nobody condemned it. I'm surprised that nobody condemned it. We were at we came to Security Council, we had a meeting, we talked about it. Everybody, regretted it, but not condemned it, including United States and Britain and France. Three of them would not condemn it, would not deplore it, would not, even we at one time wanted to make a statement saying that it is unacceptable to do that. They didn't accept. So, I don't know. We still think this is very, very dangerous. In fact, in U.S. Congress, somebody introduced a bill in order to prevent terrorists from holding such kind of things. But of course, you cannot control terrorists. If you can control them, then they wouldn't be terrorists. So this is the story between us. We are people that we want peace. We want to finish redrawing or agreeing on the border in order to have security at the border for both people. Now, the war that started 10 days ago, it increased those who were displaced in Israel. If there were 60,000, now there are over 100,000. And it increased more those who were displaced in Lebanon. We had 110 or 11,000, they say. Now probably have 500,000, because the whole south is now a target of Israeli attack. So that's where we are. We're creating for each other problems, and we are not solving the problem. The problem is to really sit down and talk indirectly through the United States. We still insist that the United States, and I heard from the dean now that Mr. Amos Hochstein is coming next week, and no, this week, Thursday. Yeah, I think he's in Washington. He's in New York now, and he was successful in mediating an agreement, a maritime agreement between us and Israel. That was in October 2022. And we invited him to come and help us continue on the land border. Until now, he has not been successful. We want him to try and get peace on our borders with Israel. We want a secure border, stable border between us and Israel, as it is between Israel and Jordan and between Israel and Egypt, because they have very stable borders. The relations may not be warm, but they have very stable borders. Very rarely you have problems. I think I'll stop here.
Okay, so let me ask then, I think what you're calling for is continued mediation by the United States of the conflict. So I'll be blunt. Do you think that's enough, or is there more that the U.S. can do?
Look, if there is a country that can do something, it's the United States. United States supports Israel with money, with weapons, and with ammunition. In the history of the relations between the United States and Israel, many at least 3 administrations used what they support Israel with in order to make Israel accept a U.S. position. Kissinger, in 1973 and 1975, probably a long time before your parents were born, right? So he all what he said, they didn't. For example, I remember 1975, he reached an agreement with the Syrians on the Golan. The Israelis did not accept. So he said, okay, I'm leaving to Washington and we are going to reevaluate our relations with Israel. By the time he arrived to Washington, I'm talking about Henry Kissinger, the government of Israel, headed by Isaac Rabin at that time, accepted the agreement. George Bush, the father, he used it also in 1991. He wanted Israel to come to the peace conference in Madrid. And he stopped $10 billion from going to Israel in like housing guarantees or something like that. And again, it was Shamir that he came to the conference, the peace conference in Madrid. And you know, this peace conference generated talks between the Palestinians and Israelis and the Oslo agreements in 1993, when at that time President Clinton became president, and an agreement was signed at the White House by Palestinians and Israelis. Rabin was there and Yasser Arafat was there. You know, I always say also that at one time, Yasser Arafat, who passed away in 2004, was, at one time, he was a terrorist. Fatah was hijacking planes. But then, when he accepted, and there was a possibility for peace, he was at the White House more than once. He was at the United Nations more than once. He was accepted in all over Europe or wherever. So, you know, George Washington was a terrorist, right, to the British. And Menachem Begin of Israel was a terrorist to the British as well. So, you know, usually these rebels, you know, they become terrorists of those who are occupying their land or something. So, we shouldn't be afraid of negotiating with what now is known as terrorists, because they are people who can make peace in the future. I know it's very difficult to negotiate with Hamas in these days, after what happened on October 7 and after. But at one time, that's why we have ceasefires at one time, to cool it down and start talking. And talking means we have to achieve peace. Now we go back. In 1948, the United Nations created 2 states on the land, what was called Palestine. And it was under the British mandate. One state was established, which was Israel, and the other one was not established. Gradually, they became rebels, they became terrorists, they became whatever, they became Hamas, and anyone like Fatah became friendly with the West, friendly with Israelis, but it did not achieve a Palestinian state, started losing base. And who won, who gained all of this is Hamas. So even if Hamas now does not achieve anything, I think in Gaza and in the West Bank, there are going to be organizations to the left of Hamas, because such kind of play that is going on now in the land of, in the geographic Palestine, would not produce peace. Israel has been living in war since 1948. It's time to try peace. That's what we say. That's all what we wanted. Peace, it has to be between them and the Palestinians. We Lebanese, we have nothing to do, or Jordanians, or Egyptians. I'm talking about the neighbors of Israel. We all agree that this is a Palestinian-Israeli issue. They've got to solve it, because it is really giving all the neighbors a lot of troubles.
I have lots of questions I want to ask you, but I know we need to get to Q&A in a minute. So I'll ask you one that follows up a bit on what you just said. Thinking about what kind of dynamics in the conflict end up leading to support of Hamas. I want to ask that question about Hezbollah. Do you think that the escalation that has happened, particularly in the last week since the attacks with the pagers, and or the prospect of even greater escalation to, for example, a ground invasion by Israel into Lebanon, what does that do to Hezbollah's popularity within Lebanon? And I realize that Lebanon, of course, is a divided society. So, but in general, do you think that that will increase support of the Lebanese people for Hezbollah as a protector? Will it undermine their support, which I think is the Israeli theory? Or will it polarize, that some will become more supportive of Hezbollah and some will become less?
Presently, I think the largest number of Lebanese is in support of Hezbollah. Not because they want a revolt or they want a resistance which does not really take into consideration the state as is, or the sovereignty of the country, sovereignty of the state, because we are being, everybody knows. I mean, look, we had a war in Lebanon. Part of this war was Lebanese against Palestinians, not necessarily all Lebanese, but part of the Lebanese. But now, when we see what's happening in Gaza, you cannot but say, come on, this is inhumane, this is something should not be happening in the 21st century. And you see all Lebanese supporting Palestinians now. Same thing now, I mean, there were a lot of Lebanese who were against Hezbollah getting involved in the war. But now, with Israel doing what it's doing, you see, I think most of the Lebanese are in support of Hezbollah. Not for Hezbollah to have resistance and fight war, etc., but it is very clear that what's happening, the escalation is Israeli. People see it, people know it, people live it there, you know. When it comes in areas that has nothing to do with Hezbollah. And you see that planes go low and break the sound barrier and scare children and scare women and scare elderly. It's not going to be acceptable. This is what's happening is unacceptable, really, to all Lebanese. And many Lebanese parties that do not agree, and they said to Hezbollah, you took your decision alone. You cannot take a decision alone. You've got to consult with other Lebanese. But now they say, no, it's different now. We support you. We not support you, support. We do not support what Israel is doing against you or against Lebanon.
Thank you. So we have about 15 minutes. So I think in the interest of getting a lot of questions in, I'll collect 3 questions from the audience and then turn to you. And I'm sure we won't get to everyone, but we'll get as many in as we can. So I'll start here.
Dear Minister, thank you so much for being here.
Shall I give you this?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. So I find it deeply upsetting that Israel decided to skip the negotiation stage and mediation and directly resorted to violence and bombardment. And considering that this decision resulted in death of civilians on your territory, what have you considered a proportionate response to this violence? Thank you.
And don't answer that yet. We're going to collect a few. Yeah.
Hi, so I've seen open domestic support in the U.S. for Palestine increase dramatically in recent times, especially in the youth, and then also states in the UN are openly supporting Palestine more than ever. How does this affect talks and diplomacy?
Thanks. And there was one, back there. Thanks. And next round I'll take from this side.
3 ladies also.
Marhaba Ustaz Bazir, it's an honor to be here. I grew up in Beirut. I just have a question about what you think the internal situation is going to look like within the next few days and the government's preparedness to protect Lebanese people and internally displaced people. I've had friends tell me that there's a lot of chaos and there's not even people to direct traffic, so I just wanted to get your opinion about that. Shukran.
Well, it is, I mean, I've been here for a week now, so it's very difficult to know what's happening later. But what I hear, what I read, what I see is that it's a big mess. But we have, the government was prepared for it, and we were able to help a lot of people coming from south. It's going to be a big mess because we didn't expect that many really to be coming and become refugees. Now we close schools, and universities, and we're allowing people to use it to see what happens in the future, how long it's going to take. I mean, I can't describe it well because I'm not there, but it is a messy situation that has been created. Second question.
On the increase in support for Palestinians especially in the U.S. among
yes.
youth. Yeah.
Well, I read I think it was in the New York Times, Ezra Klein, I think, he writes in the New York Times, right?
Yes.
I read an article, he said, why, I'm Jewish, he said, and why I like Israel, and now I see young people in America used to like Israel, and now things are changing. It's because at that time Israel that's his answer, and I think this answer would also answer questions. At that time, Israelis they used to talk like Shak Samir and Shimon Peres and others. They used to talk about peace all the time, that we want peace. But unfortunately, the Arab were late in coming to peace. In 2002, in an Arab summit in Beirut, they agreed on peace, on two-state solution, and he said, swapping land with peace. But at that time, Sharon had come to power, and he refused it. He said, what this new generation of Americans see, Jewish or non-Jewish, what it sees is people calling for war rather than for peace. People destroying, people killing. I mean, nobody can see what's happening in Gaza and now in Lebanon. And when you see like 5,000 of them in 1 second, they were damaged, something in them was damaged, and be acceptable. This is the 21st century. That's why Israel is using a lot of support all over, not all of America, Europe as well. And, if there was a little bit sympathy in the Arab world as well, it's gone now with what we see happened. It cannot, this is 21st century. We cannot do this way to each other. I mean, I can understand what happened in October 7 really was a big blast to the Israelis, a big blow for the Israelis. And, a revenge, okay, if you want to take it as this, a revenge is not a license to kill. What happened is that the Israeli government had license to kill. Nobody cares how it kills people, whether it kills people, whether there is, sometimes you kill, like they killed one from Hezbollah in a building, but they destroyed 2 buildings. And I don't know how many, like 30 people were killed and so many injured, and 2 buildings were destroyed in order to kill 1 person. You cannot do that. That's why Israel is losing a lot of support in America or in Europe as well. I think, the time that Israeli leaders used to call for peace is gone. I mean, there are people who want peace. And let's see, if there is election, but there isn't going to be election, because this government has a majority of 64 out of 120, and therefore, and that's why there is a talk that Mr. Netanyahu may not have wanted to do what has been done, especially with Lebanon, but he has to do it because he has extremists in his government, and if they leave, his government would lose confidence in the Knesset and so on. So I don't want to get involved in domestic politics of Israel, but I think, now the Palestinians are calling for peace and the Israelis are doing war. It's not they're saying it, but they're doing it. And we see it all the way. Third question was...
about the government of Lebanon's response to the attacks. Is that, yeah.
Well, now all what we can do is to help the Lebanese whose houses are destroyed, who were killed, who were maimed, who were injured, in order to continue living. And it's a very difficult job for a country that last 3 years we had a lot of crisis. We had economic crisis, banking crisis, and the port blast, that killed 200 people. So we have a lot. I mean, I came to government 3 years ago. Nothing was stable in the land. Even we have yes, Lebanese armed forces, but we can't pay them. We didn't have money to pay them even. It's a little bit better now, and we had to ask, like we asked the U.S. Congress to give money to pay $100 for each soldier to stay, because they have to live themselves. They have families and so on. And other countries like Qatar also help very much in this regard. So now we are better off. Slowly we are getting off. But in the case of the South, as my Prime Minister said it in a meeting with ambassadors representing members of Security Council, maybe a month ago, he said, yes, my government has to take decisions, but we don't have any cards in our hand. Either Hezbollah took the cards or Israel took the cards. The cards is their hand. You cannot say order a ceasefire. Now, we sought a ceasefire through indirectly and really discreetly with the United States and with others to see what we can do. We were unsuccessful because nobody can make the other party who was fighting accept ceasefire. To my knowledge, neither the United States was able to convince Israel, nor we were able to convince Hezbollah in this.
Yes. We don't have much more time. I know you have a very hard stop at 2:45, so maybe I'll just take one or two more here.
Thank you for being here. I wanted to ask that if Hezbollah would not be present in Lebanon, do you think that there will be a bigger opportunity for peace between Israel and Lebanon?
And last one here. Thanks.
I want to ask, given that these attacks are most likely weakening Hezbollah pretty substantially, are you worried about the internal balance of power within Lebanon weakening and theoretically seeing a return to sectarian violence?
Difficult question.
Shall we start here? Can you?
Yeah, if Hezbollah wouldn't be present.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of related to this.
Yes. If Hezbollah's armed presence, in South Lebanon, it's because there is occupation. If it's not Hezbollah, it would be some other organization. In fact, there were others, but Hezbollah was able to control them and, make itself. Sometimes it allows, in this war that's going on, it allows some organizations to throw some missiles here and there. But the control is Hezbollah, no doubt about it. So it's not Hezbollah that created the military, it is the occupation that created the resistance or the militancy or whatever you want to call it, or what Israel calls it terrorists. Call them whatever you want. It is the occupation that created that. Okay? And the second question, you mean, the defeat of Hezbollah, would it upset the balances?
Of power within Lebanon.
Look, we have in Lebanon, we have agreed some time ago, after we finished the civil war, to live happily with each other. We are, there are many countries in this world that are Christians. I mean, and let me go a little bit back and say there was a book in the early 90s about the clash of civilization. Okay, who clash of civilization between who and who? It's not between Christianity and Buddhism or Hinduism. It's between Christianity and Islam, right? It has been. This has been since the year 500 going on. Off and on, Muslims come to Europe. Europe goes to the Middle East, and so on. And in this regard, I mean, Islam stayed in Spain for maybe 700 years. Okay? And now Spain is Spain, right? The Crusaders stayed 200 years in the Middle East. Where are they now? You see some blue eyes, but they didn't change. They didn't make the Middle East like Europe. So nobody, I mean, then came the Europeans later, the mandate and the colonial power. They didn't change. Middle East is still Middle East. You've got to live in the Middle East. So you have countries that are Muslim countries with minority of Christians, and you have Christian countries with minority of Muslims. And in both kind of countries, you will see that the minority does not feel that it's equal, although the laws could be equalize them, doesn't feel that they are equal. Only in Lebanon, Christianity and Muslim, they feel on equal footing, and they feel this way, and we like it. And this makes our country different from the others in the Middle East. And some don't like us because we are different than them. And this gives us a lot of freedom. You have lots of freedom. We have a little bit of democracy, but a lot of freedom in Lebanon. You can say whatever you want. You can talk whatever you want. If you are a diplomat, some of them would be diplomats in the future, right? So if you are a diplomat, read those who passed by Lebanon and wrote about it. Lebanon, if you want to know about Yemen, you can know it in Lebanon more than you can know it in Yemen or Egypt. Why? Because there are people in Yemen and Lebanon who operate this way, and you can always talk to them. There, if you go to another Arab country, whatever the lowest in the foreign ministry says, he says the same thing as the top, all the way it comes, you know. There is no kind of freedom that you see in Lebanon. And that's why in Lebanon, a lot of Arabs, they like it to be as free as it is, and others that don't like freedom, don't like us as well. So, but we have accepted this. I mean, there is a little bit of tension, of course, among the various communities, but really, this system that we agreed upon maybe needs a little bit of amendment in order to operate better, but in the whole, we accept it and we like it the way it is.
So I know that you have to leave us. We're so grateful that you were able to take some time. This is so much is riding on what I hope are behind-the-scene negotiations going on during the UNGA, and I know that you're working tirelessly to try to de-escalate this conflict for the sake of your people and for peace in the region and the world. And we're very grateful for your work doing that, and particularly that you took a bit of time out of that to come and share with us your views on this crisis. So thank you so much.
I still
Dr.
have
Bou
1
Habib.
minute, so I can say.
Okay, you can have the last one.
Thank you very much for coming and to have this dialogue with each other. And I'm really proud of my Consul General here in New York, who's a graduate of the business school in Columbia. So thank you very much. And hopefully we'll come and visit you again sometimes.
I hope so, and I hope in more peaceful days.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.